I know there are many stories people tell about the forest to creep people out. Most of those are obviously fake. Killer mud monsters and satanic cults aren't likely to kill campers enjoying their time in the woods. People know that, but those stories are fun, and that's why they get told. This one is different. As far as I know, it goes all the way back to the late 70s. There was a guy named Dylan. Dylan was a skilled hiker. He didn't just hike and camp around here. He was a legit outdoors guy. He would backpack and climb mountains all over the country. This guy really knew what he was doing. These woods here, they were practically his backyard. He and his friends set up a camp for a couple nights not too far from here. According to his friend, Dylan started a fire and was getting ready to cook up their dinner. That's when Dylan told him he would be right back. A few minutes later, that's when he heard the screaming. He ran towards the screaming, looking for his friend, not knowing what to expect. The screaming stopped, but he raced forward. It wasn't long before he found his friend. Dylan was lying in a hole in the ground, or at least what was left of him. His body was a meaty mess. Limbs were torn off his torso. His entrails were spilled across the bottom of the hole. Some limbs were gone entirely. That's when his friend ran out of the forest. No one knows how long it took him to make it out. When he returned with the sheriff to the site, less of Dylan's body was there. Animals saw this meaty mess as a delicious snack. His entire skeleton was laid across the ground with small chunks of meat left on some of the bones. The crazy part was, there was no hole. He tried to explain to the police, but they told him he was in a state of shock and couldn't possibly remember. The official story was this was a bear attack, even though it wasn't consistent with any other bear attack on record. A good portion of this forest was then off limit for most of the 1980s because of so-called animal attacks. So many of these victims who had companions discovered them soon after whatever happened, all reported their bodies being in a large hole, and in all of these cases, no hole was found when a body was discovered by the authorities. Law enforcement attributed that to people hearing about the whole story and that their brain rationalized what they found. The thing is that most of these people claim to have never heard the whole story prior to discovering their friends' bodies. In most of their stories, they spoke of the victims all being drawn away and telling them they needed to go check out something or that they would be right back. How could all of their stories be so similar? If you ask me, they couldn't. A bunch of locals who hunted in these woods believed their stories too. They set out to find a hole or whatever it was that was killing all of these people. I'm sure you remember the forest fire we had about 20 years ago, right? Well, I think they said it came from a campfire that wasn't properly put out, but that's not what happened. A group of people came out to these woods to find a hole. They split up into pairs so none of them would be left alone if anything would happen to the other one's partner. Surprisingly, this simple plan worked. One of the people wandered off from his campsite and was unresponsive when his partner called out to him. Their partner quickly radioed the rest of the team, and soon enough they were all following their wandering friend. As they walked through the dark woods on a moonless night, the only source of light came from their flashlights. Their partner slowed his pace, and that's when they saw it. A hole maybe 10 feet deep and equally as wide, but this was no natural hole. The hole was lined with several rows of teeth circling the entirety of it. It smelled of rotten meat, and as their friend neared the hole, it let out a thunderous roar. The group pulled their companion back and held him down. They brought several sticks of dynamite with them. 4 men lit the wicks on the dynamite sticks and tossed them into the hole. They all understood the danger of this, but there was a beast in their forest and the beast had to be stopped, no matter the cost. The blast was huge and the explosion engulfed the nearby trees. You know the story after that. Huge fire, firefighters coming from multiple states, TV coverage, nearby homes were destroyed. But there were no arrests because one of the people that lit his wick was the sheriff's brother, so that part of the story was covered up. They all believed that the dynamite or the fire that followed destroyed the hole. And they're probably right. I don't think there's been a report of any crazy death since then. But sometimes there are things lurking in the woods that you don't know about. Hang on. I gotta go check on something. I'll be right back.